This next panel dives into the venture strategy and capitalization models for Web3 innovation. The name of the panel is Fueling the Future. Fueling the Future Innovation Capitalization Strategies for the Web. We are going to have it moderated by Nadya Rousseau. Yes. She is the founder and CEO of Alter New Media. We're going to have Vincent Kad. Okay. CEO of Polymath. We have Kevin Jackson. He is the executive director of the National DigiFoundry, and we have Andrew Durgee. Good. The co-CEO of Republic, and we also have Terry Culver, president of Digital Finance Group. Welcome them to the stage.
Are we working?
A new wife.
Hello. Hi everyone. I am really honored to lead this conversation. Today we're exploring how to fund what's next, and not just with capital, but also with trust. I have some phenomenal leaders here leading the charge with me today, and I would like to give each of them a very brief opportunity to introduce themselves and what they're doing. Vincent, start with you.
I'll try and be brief. We have our own layer one chain, Polymesh, that we launched mainnet in 2021. Interestingly enough, actually, it's a public permission chain. It's always been a public permission chain. You heard earlier how public permission is what's acceptable in the security space. And so we've been operational for 4 years. We're taking Polymath along with our layer one chain to the public markets. We are working on a transaction right now to do that. We tokenized historically on Ethereum about $4 billion worth of assets on chain. On our Polymesh layer one chain, we tokenized roughly $900 million worth of assets on chain right now. We're a white label solution. We're integrated to ecosystems that are out there, including with BitGo as a digital custodian, Zodia as well. I think we're doing something with Mr. Republic here too, where there's an integration. We've already announced that as well. But yeah, regulatory frameworks has always been our number one thought process. How do we ensure actually that we fit in and we build infrastructure for the regulatory framework so that everybody actually is comfortable with what we're doing? And by bringing our layer one public, we believe we're raising the level of confidence of what it means to be a Web3 chain in this space that's focusing and saluting the regulatory framework.
Thank you. Kevin.
Yes, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kevin Jackson. You probably know me as the Executive Director of the National DigiFoundry, soon to be known as the Institute for Digital Asset Innovation. We're all rebranding. What do? We provide an environment to innovate. We've also initiated a service for our members for real-world asset tokenization, thanks to Black Wallet, Constellation Network, and Space Technologies, and Forward Edge AI. More to come on your digital feed. Thank you.
Hey everybody, my name is Andrew Durgee. I'm co-CEO of Republic. Republic is a digital merchant bank out of New York with nose to tail integration from tokenization to primary issuance, custody, storage, wallet products, infrastructure, and secondary market liquidity.
Terry Culver, president of Digital Finance Group. We are a Web3 investment fund established back in 2016. And we really focus on two priorities. One, funding very fundamental level innovation that may or may not have commercial application. Of course, it does, but it's a bit of an R&D exercise for us. And then we also fund businesses and projects that bridge the Web3 ecosystem with the traditional financial system and other services in the traditional world.
Thank you, everyone. So my first question is, what is fundamentally changing about how innovation is funded, and what does that mean for long-term trust and inclusion? Vincent, can we start with you?
Repeat that again?
Sure, I know, it's a long one. So what's fundamentally changing about how innovation is funded? Obviously, we're looking at a lot of non-traditional pathways right now, but how do we kind of bridge that divide between trust, inclusion, innovation? What does that look like in your space, for example?
Well, I think just the way projects are being funded today is very innovative. When layer one change, the token drops, the token offering, right? That's very different than an equity offering in a traditional sense. Like, wind the clock back 10 years ago, founders were selling equity in their business, like percentages of that. They had a partner at the table. Today, they're token offerings, and you don't have that partner at the table, but you have actually large whales that come in and take on large allocations to fund projects. What we see now in this whole tokenization of real world asset space, that's also very interesting as well, because there's a whole nother set of assets that are coming on chain, from whiskey barrels, in order to allow distilleries to start scaling, to real estate plays as well. Like there's been a lot of real estate that's been coming on chain, tokenized, in order to build scale, because there's a lot of downward pressure depending on which market you're in with real estate, right? And so builders, people that are in the traditional space and looking for financing, they can go to the traditional banks, which are, again, like they're very expensive lending opportunities or funding opportunities, or they can go to an alternative space, which is go to the people that love the brand, love the product, or will live in that space or live in the community as well, and provide them with something that's alternative, right? Which is a security token that's tied to something really that's underlying.
Right, no, that makes sense. And I think that kind of layer of tangibility, like for example, being able to tokenize someone's like assets in an estate sale, kind of makes it a bit easier to grasp probably for some people as well. Kevin, I'd love your take on that question.
Yes, thank you. I agree that decentralization is taking over everywhere. But one thing that historically we've seen is governments, central governments, being the only organizations that had capital that were willing to invest in basic science or basic new business models. And the commercial world would only invest in something that was already proven because they wanted to make profit, obviously. But what I'm seeing now, having feet in both the public and private sector, is more and more public-private partnerships. And a lot of that is being driven by decentralized finance in general and real-world asset tokenization specifically. At the National DigiFoundry, we saw this as a trend. And it's not just a trend in the United States, but a global trend. Hence our transition to the Institute for Digital Asset Innovation. Because across every industry vertical, there's a need for capital. And what we're seeing is a niche where we can identify public, governments and entities and private companies that are willing to work together to bring more value to our global society. And that's what we're doing.
Love that, Andrew.
Yeah, I think we're missing the bigger narrative here, which is for the first time since basically the 1930s, retail has been able to participate in assets that are pre-IPO. That's the really big change that's been happening, right? Well, retail owns so much of the Web3 space because they can, right? Pre-IPO shares, they haven't been able to own, for example. Right? And that becomes extremely problematic now because you have less and less companies going public, you have public companies going back private, and all the wealth creation, wealth generation happens pre-IPO. Not long ago, the average company stayed private for 5 years. Now the average is like 14 years. So retail is really screwed. Their only option that they have really now is in the Web3 space, and the tokenization rails that have been built around has allowed them now to participate. Like we're doing pre-IPO SpaceX tokenization. It's like one of the biggest launches we've ever done. The reason there's so much retail interest is because it's the first time that they can have exposure to an asset class that they've been kept out of. And so you're gonna see that movement move more and more. And what's really interesting about it is not only does retail want it, but the private equity side wants it too, right? They want access to the retail markets, right? And so, I mean, there's a big acquisition happening yesterday. Morgan Stanley bought equities in. Like, that's a really good litmus test of what you're going to start to see more and more of at the top tier of the traditional finance space. They're going to try to access private markets. They're going to try to deliver private markets to retail hands. And crypto itself was like the litmus test for that. And you're going to start to see a lot of penetration from that, specifically from that direction.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. And Terry, what about you?
Yeah, I'd like to go back to your comment about trust, or what I think of as credibility. Right, Web3 is built on this idea of trustlessness at a fundamental level, but yet once you start offering products and services to the public markets, the question of credibility comes into play. And this is one market or series of innovations that has developed very much outside the typical consortium of government funding and university development. And so I think that question of trust or credibility is still very much an open one. I think it's starting to get answered through businesses like Republic and others, who can be qualified kind of intermediaries, but it's in the very early stages.
That makes sense. Okay, so now I have individual questions for each of you based off your respective backgrounds. So I want to start with you, Vincent. In your opinion, what's still blocking large-scale tokenized securities adoption, and what breakthroughs could finally change that?
I think Terry hit it on the head around trust, right? And so I think, we spent the last 7 years educating the market, right? Building the infrastructure, laying the foundation, building a public permission chain, right? All validators on our network are financial services entities. Republic is a financial services entity. They're a broker-dealer, they're a transfer agent, they're an ATS, they report to a regulator, they qualify, they're validators on our network, or soon to be. So laying that foundation is important, but then also, continuing down that thread as well to be able to show use cases. The large institutions are coming, but even the large institutions like BlackRock that really supports this industry, that money market fund was, again, it was a digital custodian play. There's 13 holders actually in that fund. It's not like highly liquid. It's
QP only.
Yeah, there we go. And so I'm not discrediting that, but we need the retail now to come in and to build that trust. Like we shied away from centralization because during 2008, 2009, don't trust centralization. Now we have to gain the trust on the other side, and there's been, I'd say, I've had a lot of talk with people because this industry is like rife with scammers, fraud, and so how do you gain that trust back from the industry? And that's very important actually as well, because when you build a trustless or decentralized actually, like decentralized system like Telegram, who do you call for Telegram for support? Nobody. They volunteers. Who's volunteering actually? I don't know. Like I have an issue with Telegram right now. Someone hijacked my profile. Nobody answers, right? So there's a lot of bad actors out there. It's about building that trust. Taking a company public for me, and I think the Republic as well, and anybody else like Securitas, like we're legitimizing actually what we're doing. We have to report to a regulator. That's important, I think, for this industry that we're all growing up in the industry and ensuring actually that this is an institutional play. So it's a matter of, I think the institutions, some of the larger ones, or the skeptical ones, are still waiting on the sidelines because they're saying, nobody's got a gun to my head that I have to support tokenization. But once actually the market's moved over, and once the retail is actually moving in, and the retail starts pulling the funds from large institutions, then actually we'll see, okay, now there's a gun to your head, and maybe it's too late.
Yeah, and I think, on the topic of trust, a lot of this is like this whole conversation here. I mean, for example, like the idea that governance and innovation cannot coexist, but they really have to coexist. And so I think that leads me to, ask you a question, Kevin. You obviously have been driving collaboration between the private and public sectors for some time. So in your opinion, what policy frameworks or partnerships could really accelerate more movement in the space?
Well,
that brought out a laugh.
yeah. So, first of all, the government doesn't accelerate anything, right? But
They like to think that
they
they
think they do.
It's hard to accelerate when you're shut down.
Quiet. They're everywhere. But things that happen in the private sector do accelerate the government just last week, Big Blue, IBM, tokenized their shares. Okay? That is an earthquake. All right? Now the government is saying, wow, we're so far behind. so I see like there are three sort of pathways to fund and get capital for innovation in the Web3, Industry 4.0, blockchain industry. The first is the traditional pathway. Small Business Innovative Research, SBIRs, STTRs. Government is now putting out multiple challenges where they say, this is a challenge to our agency. We want you to come to us with an innovative solution, and we'll pay you to develop it, and they'll pay you with non-dilutive capital. That's huge, okay? How many of you have heard about a TACFI or a StratFi? All right, that could give you 25 million dilutive investment, and you can actually get matching funds from a private industry. So this is the government asking and working with you to get private capital to innovate. The second, the private companies themselves, they see this as an opportunity. And there are multiple Web3 Industry 4.0 companies that will say, give us your idea, build it on our infrastructure, and we'll give you capital. We are funded. One of my favorites, I'm not saying this because he's sitting right here in front of me, but Constellation Network and the Stargazer Collective. I mean, they have a wonderful platform, and to be truthful, we build some of our services on top of Constellation because of its legacy of providing value and security to the U.S. Department of War now. But not only them, but Solana. We have worked with Black Wallet, but Solana actually also gives grants. The Ethereum Foundation, they give grants. And there are many, many other entities that give grants for innovative Web3 Industry 4.0. And the third sort of column, I think, would be DAOs, Distributed Autonomous Organizations. The National DigiFoundry itself is a DAO. In fact, we're registered in Wyoming. There are many states that are now recognizing DAOs as legal entities. So the Institute for Digital Innovation, Asset Innovation, which will sort of subsume the National DigiFoundry in the coming months, will be a source. We're doing real-world asset tokenization, and members will be able to enjoy profit sharing from that revenue stream. Another one of our strategic partners is the United Nations Dynamic Coalition on Blockchain Assurance and Standardization. And this is a close partner with the Government Blockchain Association, which is a strategic partner of ours. They actually have a grant program as well, specifically for innovations in the Web3 space. So that's this blending of the private sector and the public sector to accelerate Web3 industry and blockchain.
Thank you. And on the note of acceleration, Andrew, Republic has helped democratize access to private markets. What lessons from that model do you think can shape the next phase of decentralized fundraising for startups?
I think, you hear a lot up here about new asset classes, access. Everyone defines democratize differently. And I think, at least from our position where we're looking at it, is there's large parts of the markets, whether that is the assets or that is the retail individuals that have been held out. And the trick is, how do you get these two to meet somewhere in the middle? When they meet in the middle is where you'll see a lot of value creation. And so for our perspective, public's perspective, we want to be the infrastructure to do that. Just like Polymath, same thing. They want to be the infrastructure that allows those two to meet. Right? You know, I think a lot of us often get caught up in that we want to be the adoption layer. We want this to be everyone here wants to be the adoption layer. That's where a lot of fun things happen. The sooner that everyone realizes that we really are still the infrastructure layer and stay focused on that, we'll be able to create this for the adoption layer, which is the next ones to come. So just as an anecdote, you know, every basic 15-year-old, 16-year-old on the planet now has only existed in a world where Bitcoin's existed. Right? That's the adoption. That's who we're building all this for. They will be native to the space, and we are the stewards. It's our responsibility to create that legacy for them. So that's really how we look at it from our chair, particularly Republic. That's the lens we like to use.
Yeah, and I think, you know, like the word democratize, as you mentioned, like it can kind of be loaded for some people. And I think people who are looking in at Web3 in the space from the outside, they view a lot of it as jargony and hype, but you know, you're really doing the thing. So in your words, like what does democratization really mean to you in context of what you're doing at Republic?
Unimpeded access to markets. That's really what it is. Doesn't matter who you are, or what you are, or where you're from, that level playing field that you can participate in markets just like anyone else. The fact that a single mother of two in Iowa can mortgage her house, go to Vegas, put it all on black, is fine, but if she owns pre-IPO SpaceX, that's illegal, makes no sense, right? And like, that needs to change fundamentally. And she wants that to change, the markets want that to change, and it really comes down to the government ultimately to get comfortable with that, and that is happening. We believe really strongly in existing SEC administration. They really want private market access for retail. We want to be a good advocate for that, and we think it's going in that direction. So we're really excited, you know, for the next couple of years.
Thank you. And Terry, from your global investment perspective, what signals or metrics do you rely on to assess the resilience of emerging tech sectors during often volatile market cycles?
Always volatile. Guy is sitting in his basement or garage and has a great idea that changes the world. That is not how innovation happens. Innovation is a social activity. Ideas are community-owned, public, and they're driven. Innovation is driven by necessity. And so, you know, for example, one of our first investments years ago was as the lead investor in the build and launch of USDC. Managed by Circle, which has gone public. And the reason we did that was because we knew that there was a deep need for US dollar denominated digital assets in emerging markets. You could see in hyperinflationary environments, the adoption of crypto accelerated, and we thought this was probably the best way to fill that need. And it's taken a while, but it's getting there. The other thing we look at is collaboration. You know, in early stage tech, there's this impulse to try to be a first mover. In my mind, that's a complete fallacy. You know, first mover advantage does not apply in environments where you have high rates of change and low rates of adoption. And that has described Web3 for, since its inception. So we look for tech that is open, not just open source, but open to collaboration with other platforms rather than building an isolated environment where they hope people will come. It's not going to happen.
Yes, for sure. Well, my final question for all of you is if you could design one change in mindset, policy, or infrastructure to unlock a more inclusive and resilient innovation economy, what would that be? Just perfect world. We'll start with you, Vincent.
Should we start down and then?
Yeah. Well, no, we have to do it right now. Right now. I think Terry, you're ready for it.
I'm ready.
You're ready for this.
I would do everything possible to protect censorship resistance. And I think that's a very difficult thing to do as institutions get involved into Web3, as Web3 becomes more compliant, which is a good thing. But to my mind, the fundamental innovation of Web3 is its ability to allow anybody, anywhere in the world, to onboard and use this system without control or gatekeeping. And I think as the ecosystem grows and matures, that's going to become much more difficult to do.
Thank you, Andrew.
Reevaluated. I'm not saying it has to be removed, although that would be fantastic since it doesn't exist in most other nations. But it definitely needs to be reevaluated. And in parallel to that, redefining what a security is also should not be running on rails from a Howey test from 80 years ago. So I think we need to get very comfortable with the reality that we can grow up. Everyone's adults in this room, and we can make that happen. It's not impossible. Like, it can be done. We have changed the accreditation system previously. Like, we can do it again, and we're doing everything in our power to make it happen.
Thank you. Kevin?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I'm really excited about being able to answer this question in front of a room of entrepreneurs. Because everyone here is an entrepreneur in one way or another. And one of the biggest problems that an entrepreneur has is when they get a great idea, they think they have the great idea that nobody else has. That's a fallacy. When you have a great idea, there's 100, maybe 200 people around the world that have the exact idea at the same time or earlier. The only difference between you and them is the ability to execute on that idea. And how do you execute and deliver any new idea, any new innovation? You touched on it. It's collaboration. It's by working together. That is one reason why I believe a DAO is one of the most revolutionary ways to create innovation. When you have your idea, build a community, build a village around that idea, then you
On blockchain, the license bureau, the land department as well. Like, we see this in the UAE with Dubai. They put their entire land department in the registration and to do this. We're going to show how the rest of the world to do this, and we're falling behind, right, as a result of that. Why? Because we're in discussions with red tape. And it's like, well, but how does this all work? Well, why don't we actually just do a proof of concept? Like, pick a city, pick a state, pick something actually in order to do that. Let's pick a Caribbean island actually.
I was about to say, let's find an island.
crypto island.
Puerto Rico, is that not actually where everybody's going? At least actually where there's a lot of crypto enthusiasts actually
Maybe
living.
not right now, with the hurricane stuff, no islands.
But I would love to see that, because I think that would just shake it. And we're watching other countries, jumping ahead of utilizing and embracing this innovation, and showing us actually what to do with technology, and technology that's created actually either onshore or that's moved offshore actually as a result of so much friction.
Absolutely. Well, it has been such an honor to be up here with all of you trailblazers, and I think the big C word here to walk away from is not just capital, but more importantly, collaboration. So I would like to
We have